At 17, most people were stuck in school doing boring schoolwork. Others were just getting their driver's license. At 17, many people were thinking of how much alcohol they would chug once they could legally drink. Others had relationship trouble, but not Fred DeLuca. At 17, Fred was busy, founding the second largest fast food chain in the world. Yes, Fred DeLuca was just out of high school when he started what would eventually become what is today known as Subway. The next time you order a footlong, remember that Subway was founded by a 17-year-old who didn't take no for an answer. A 17-year-old who didn't care about his age and inexperience. A 17-year-old who dared to do, and who became successful at doing. Now, before we get to the munchy part, we're gonna have to ask you for a favor. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel right now. If you do, you'll have loads of fun munching with the Munchable family. And we'll have plenty more videos for you here on Munchable. So, let's get to it. Who is Fred DeLuca? Why was he not engrossed with boring teenager stuff when he was 17? And how did he actually pull this insane feat off? Don't worry, we're gonna tell you. In 1965, Fred DeLuca was 17 years old. He was fresh out of high school and he was in dire need of a job. Now, he didn't need a job the way most kids today need it. He needed one because he wanted to go to medical school, and he needed money to fund his dream. To solve this seemingly impossible problem, Fred borrowed $1,000 from a family friend named Pete Buck. With this money, Fred was able to create a sandwich shop in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Fred's vision when creating this sandwich shop was to make it a fast food venture that provided a healthful, less fattening bill of fare. So basically, Fred didn't want to chomp on hamburgers all day and get fat. He wanted people to get healthy and help them get the payoff for the opportunity to eat healthy food. You know, it was basically regular capitalist shenanigans. The name of the sandwich shop was Pete's Super Submarines because, well, Fred might have started it, but the capital behind all of it was owned by Pete Buck. So technically, Pete was an angel investor of sorts and was also the co-founder of the sandwich shop. Now, it's easy to think that Fred had some sort of passion for making sandwiches or something, and that's why he started the business like that. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Fred was basically the average 17-year-old who had $1,000 in seed money, a need to make much more money than he had, and a truckload of courage. And that proved to be enough. The first year of Pete's Super Submarines was definitely not easy. While Fred DeLuca called it a learning experience, and we know what that actually means, it means that there were a lot of failures and a lot of times where Fred asked himself why the hell he was even doing any of this. In fact, by the end of the first year, he'd made almost no profits and had only $6 left of the original $1,000 loan remaining. But like Fred Perry, Mr. Rogers, and loads of other people who are named Fred DeLuca persevered. However, at the end of the second year, Fred's perseverance had begun to pay dividends. Fred had learned from his first year that the keys to success were visibility and marketing, and he set out to apply that knowledge to the business. Thus, when he wanted to open a second location, he made sure that it was situated in the best location and not just a crummy location like the first shop had been situated. But even at that, the business was still slow. It wasn't until the third outlet was open that Fred began to make profits, and in fact, after the first full year, he'd earned $7,000. 3 years after establishing Pete's Super Submarines, the name was changed to just Subway. But honestly, Pete's Super Submarines is a pretty solid name in my book, but I guess Subway works too. After 2 years, Pete Buck and Fred DeLuca discovered that their fledgling sandwich business may even grow to something larger than life, something that would not just be a nice side gig. That's when they decided they had to make preemptive moves. That's why they formed a holding company called Doctors Associates that was meant to oversee the expansion of the business. But wait, isn't that a weird name? Doctors Associates? Why would a holding company meant to oversee the expansion of a sandwich restaurant chain name itself Doctors Associates? Isn't that a bit odd? Yes, it is. But there's a reason. You see, despite all of this, Fred DeLuca still wanted to go to medical school. Despite the success of Subway, this was still basically just a way for him to pay his way through college, and that's why the holding company was named Doctors Associates. Cute, right? Despite Subway being quite successful, Fred still wanted to attend college, and he did. He pursued his dream and he was finally able to graduate from the University of Bridgeport. However, by the time Fred graduated, Subway was already so big that there was no way that he could abandon it. The company had basically grown a life of its own, and that's when Fred figured, okay, if I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna do it right. In 1974, Fred and Peter opened 16 locations throughout Connecticut. However, it was somewhat difficult to keep all 16 locations cohesive and meeting the same standards. That's when they decided that they would begin franchising the business model. The same year, 14 franchises were established. Throughout this time, Subway remained dedicated to their founding principles, which was the making of high-quality, fresh, and healthy food. Subway continued to grow year after year, and just 4 years later, the restaurant had its 100th store. One of the reasons Subway had grown so rapidly in the fast food industry was that people believed that the sandwiches they were buying were healthy. So it was basically fast food with all the sweetness and all that, but with none of the diabetes. Subway was basically Tesla in a sandwich, and Fred DeLuca could have been Elon Musk, if that metaphor makes any sense. Because Subway was seen as a healthy alternative to fast foods, Fred began the process of making sure Subways were baking their own bread in store. This would eventually be one of the reasons that Subway destroyed most of its competitors in the 80s and 90s. In 1984, the company went international. However, the first international Subway shop wasn't in Europe or Canada or South America or even Asia or even the moon. It was on the island of Bahrain, just off the coast of Saudi Arabia. Just 3 years later, the company reached an incredible milestone. It had established its 1,000th store. In just 22 years, Subway had grown from one sandwich restaurant in the corner of Connecticut that was run by a 17-year-old to about 1,000 stores scattered all over America and the globe. It was a miracle. And it had all been engineered by a 17-year-old who didn't back down when he had just $6 left of that $1,000 loan. 11 years later, 1,000 stores had turned to 10,000 stores, in what can only be described as explosive growth. By the turn of the 20th century, Subway had stores in Italy, Hong Kong, Norway, the UAE, and even Pakistan. But why did Subway grow this fast? Was it luck, or was it something else? Well, we can't say for sure. However, we can say that Subway is better run than most restaurant franchise companies. For example, franchisees of Subway have said that Fred DeLuca has engineered an effective and supportive system for them. This, they say, is because he also came from poverty and knows the value of back-breaking work. He knows what it takes to keep the lights on, the toilets clean, and the sandwiches fresh. He knows everything, so he's able to cater to the needs of his franchises better. And that is why Subway had a 1,000% growth rate in the 90s. It wasn't just luck, it was the work of a CEO who knew how to relate with people and knew the value of hard work. Very soon, Subway signed an agreement with the US Navy to provide Subway stations aboard military vessels, and very soon, Subway overtook McDonald's in terms of the number of total outlets in America. At the end of 2010, Subway became the largest fast food chain worldwide with 33,749 restaurants, 1,012 more than McDonald's. And that is the story of how a 17-year-old with no experience at all created a global restaurant chain. He had only $1,000, a heart full of courage, and the arms ready to work. And that was what made all the difference. This snack brand was sent in by a subscriber. If you really want to know about the origin of your favorite snack, simply send it to us, and who knows, maybe you'll be lucky enough. We may decide to make a video on your favorite snack brand. That is all for today, guys. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Munchable videos. This is Munchable. Hope you liked the video. Munch on.